Hi everyone, today we're making an upgraded version of a classic favourite, homemade wagon wheels. Think crunchy chocolate biscuit, gooey marshmallow, raspberry jam, and all dipped in rich milk chocolate, topped with popping candy and freeze-dried raspberries. It's the ultimate sweet treat and I'm going to show you how to make it step by step. Recipe on studiokitchen.com.au. Let's get started. Alright, let's talk about this chocolate biscuit base. It's actually a chocolate sablé, a French style short pastry that's crisp, buttery and has just the right amount of snap to sandwich all of that marshmallow and jam goodness. I've got my plain flour, cocoa powder, icing sugar and a pinch of salt all sifted into a bowl, and now I'm going to add in the cold diced butter. This part is all about the fingertips. Just rub it through until you've got a fine sandy crumb. It should feel like damp sand at the beach, minus the seagulls. The pastry doesn't have any rising agents, so the texture comes from how we handle it. Light touch, cold butter, and certainly no over mixing. Okay, the egg goes in next, and the egg yolk. And I mix that just until the dough starts to come together. You don't want to knead it like bread, just a gentle press and bring it to a dough. Then I flatten it into a square, nothing too precious, just enough so that it chills evenly. Wrap it up and pop it in the fridge for about 45 minutes. That's done. The chocolate sablé biscuit, it's buttery, it's crisp and just rich enough to hold its own against all of that filling. Alright, now that our dough's had a nice rest in the fridge, it's time to roll it out. This chocolate sablé dough is going to give us those perfectly crisp, light biscuits that are going to sandwich our marshmallow and jam. So make sure you lightly flour your work surface here. We don't want the dough to stick. You grab your rolling pin and just gently roll out that dough to about 2 to 4 millimeters thick. You don't want it too thick, or it'll be more of a crunchy cookie than a light, delicate biscuit. Keep lifting it off the bench to make sure it doesn't stick, and add more flour if you need. You should be able to feel how buttery and smooth this dough is as you roll it out. That's the secret to the perfect biscuit. Once you've got your dough rolled out, carefully roll it up onto your pin and transfer it onto a sheet of baking paper. This will make it so much easier to handle in a bit. Now we're going to pop this back in the fridge for a minimum of an hour, and this helps firm it up so it's easier to cut out our discs and keeps everything nice and neat when it bakes. Alright, after that dough's had a really good chill, let's take it out of the fridge and place it onto a lightly floured surface again. Now we're going to use a round cutter to cut out our disc, but before that we'll use a pastry docker or a fork just to poke some holes in so the pastry doesn't rise too unevenly when we bake it. I'm using a 75 to 80 millimeter size cutter, but you can also go bigger or smaller depending on the size of your wagon wheels. Just carefully cut out the discs and arrange them on a baking tray lined with either baking paper or a silicone mat. This will help them bake evenly and prevent sticking. Now it's time to bake these beauties. I've preheated my oven to 170 and these will bake for about 10 to 12 minutes or until they're nice and crisp. You'll know they're done when they have a slight firm edge. Once they're done, let them cool in the tray for a couple of minutes. You'll notice they'll firm up even more as they cool. That's exactly what we want. There you have it. Perfectly baked, light and crunchy chocolate sablé biscuits. These are the foundation for our homemade wagon wheels. Onto the marshmallow, super fun part, love doing this. Let's soak our gelatine leaves in ice cold water and add our egg white into electric stand mixer bowl. Now we're going to make a syrup, so we're multitasking here. I've got water in a saucepan, adding in dextrose and adding in caster sugar. We're going to put this onto a medium heat and we're going to bring it up to a boil. What we want to do at this stage is dissolve that sugar and just get that syrup happening. So we've got 3 things on the go at the moment, and I'm just weighing out some freeze-dried raspberry powder, and I've got my red food colour handy at the end, and that's going to add the flavour and the colour. My gelatine has soaked, so I'm just pulling that out, and once the syrup comes to a boil, add in the glucose. When that happens, start to turn the mixing machine onto a medium, and we're going to keep an eye on the temperature of that syrup. We're looking for 140. Once it reaches that stage, we're going to add it into our egg white. So at this stage, we turned our egg white up to high, and we're whipping it up, and once 140 has been reached, we're just going to add it down the side of the bowl. Just turn down the mixing machine just while I'm adding it so I don't whiz the syrup everywhere, and then turn it back up to a really high speed, and look at that go. That syrup is going to cook that egg white, and at the same time that hot pan is great for melting your soaked gelatine. So just adding it in, giving it a swirl, the residual heat will melt that gelatine, in which you can add to your egg white. So we've got marshmallow on the go here. Once this gets cool, this is going to thicken up and it's going to be pipeable. But at this stage, we're going to add in our colour and our flavour. So freeze-dried raspberry powder, if you can find it. And I've also got some red water-soluble food colour. And once it reaches a cooler temperature inside the bowl, you've got a really stiff meringue. And obviously that gelatine is going to add a lot of body to it, so it's pipeable into a piping bag. And I've attached a plain nozzle. Now we're just going to pipe onto 6 of these wagon wheel bases, and I'm just going to go around in a little circle there and just fill in the middle. I'll do that with each single one of these, and it's basically just a little marshmallow base before we add in some more marshmallow and the raspberry jam. And of course the other 6 biscuits are going to be the top of this marshmallow sandwich. As you can see, it's really easy to do, and once I've done a little base, I'm just going around again on top, and I'm creating a little hole or a cavity inside our wagon wheels, and this is where the raspberry jam is going to live. So I want it nice and big. It's going to house that jam, and this is going to make sure the jam doesn't leak out the side of the wagon wheels. Homemade jam, check the recipe out on studiokitchen.com.au, or use store-bought, and using a teaspoon, I'm just adding it inside and just making sure I don't get any mess on the side. And look at that, that's going to be a flavour explosion right in the middle of our wagon wheels. Let's top it off with more of that marshmallow, and before it sets, get the lid of our wagon wheel and we just press it down just to make sure that it's stuck nice and well. Try and keep these nice and even, as neat as you possibly can, because remember we've got to dip these in chocolate. And there you go, we've got 6 absolute beauties here, and they're full of raspberry jam, so that's going to be such a surprise and such a delight when we bite into our wagon wheels later. All done, that's the fun part. Any leftover, pipe the marshmallow into a tray or into some icing sugar for some little snacks, and now it's onto the chocolate. Okay, now we're almost there. It's time to dip these wagon wheels in a smooth, glossy coat of milk chocolate. But first, we need to temper that chocolate to get the perfect shine and to get the perfect snap. This is done by first melting our milk chocolate in the microwave. We're going to heat it in 30-second intervals, stirring in between. We're going to keep it going until it reaches 45 degrees, and then that's the base temperature for our tempered chocolate. After that, we pour around 800 grams or 80% of the total weight of that melted chocolate onto a spotlessly clean workbench, and this is where the magic happens. We're going to use that palette knife and a scraper to spread it out really thinly, cooling it down, and then scraping it back up, and again spreading it out, keeping that chocolate moving so that it cools all the time and also cools evenly. I want to make sure all of this chocolate is at the right temperature all the time, and this will take you a little while depending on the temperature of your room, depending on your conditions, your environment. This is never an exact science, but what we're doing is using the digital thermometer just to make sure we check the temperature of that chocolate, and then scraping it up and getting it into the middle of the bench before putting in the probe again, just to make sure we're at the right temperature. And like I say, we're looking for 27 degrees. Now remember, we've got some reserved chocolate in a bowl. That's still warm, it's probably at about 40 degrees. I'm happy with that, check it out. So once it's cooled to 27, we're gonna scrape the chocolate back into the reserved 200 grams of melted chocolate, and we're gonna stir it well with a spatula. That will bring the temperature of the whole batch up to about 29-30 degrees, and that's our sweet spot for tempered chocolate. There we have it, ready to dip. Now, take each wagon wheel and dip it into the chocolate. We give it a quick submerge, lift it out carefully with a spatula, and we're going to shake off any excess chocolate. We want a perfect, thin, even coating. Once you've dipped it, use that palette knife to gently place the wheel back on to the prepared baking tray. It could be lined with paper. We've got silicone mat here, so it's entirely up to you, but this is where the fun begins. While the chocolate's still tacky, we're going to sprinkle a bit of the chocolate coated popping candy that we've already rolled in gold powder, and we're also going to add freeze-dried raspberry to the top of these. Make sure you do this while the chocolate's still tacky so that it all sticks. Now these toppings are going to add to an amazing crunch and an amazing burst of flavour. And let's be honest, they look pretty spectacular too, don't they? We're going to complete all 6 wagon wheels this way, and then we're going to leave them to set at room temperature for about 30 minutes. And after that, we'll pop them in the fridge for 5 minutes to set the chocolate fully. That's it. How good is that? This is such an amazing thing for you to get going. We've got pastry making, we've got marshmallow making, we've got chocolate work. This certainly does test your skills in the kitchen. But along with the recipe on studiokitchen.com.au, hopefully we've given you all the information that you need to create perfect little milk chocolate explosive raspberry wagon wheels. That's it. Gorgeous homemade wagon wheels, perfect mix of crunchy, marshmallowy, jammy goodness, all dipped in milk chocolate, ready to serve right away or box up as a sweet treat or a gift. Trust me, they'll keep in a sealed container for up to a week. They're a total crowd pleaser. Enjoy, check the recipe on studiokitchen.com, and happy baking. Thanks guys.